My name is Diane Holloway, and I have been carrying a secret for 11 years that I believed with everything in me was the right thing to carry. I believed it was an act of love. I believed it was the only choice I could have made, given what happened and when it happened and who was involved. I was wrong about one thing, not about the love. The love was real. The love is still real. But I was wrong about the secret being something I could carry forever without it eventually finding its own way out. I want to tell you what happened from the beginning, because the beginning is the only place that makes the ending make any sense. 11 years ago, I was 31 years old, living in a two-bedroom house in Nashville, Tennessee, working as an elementary school librarian, unmarried, and as settled and content in my life as a person can be without entirely realizing it. I had my books and my garden and my Saturday morning farmer's market routine, and my best friend Carol, who lived 4 blocks away, and my younger sister Jenny. Jenny was 24 and had always been the version of herself that required a specific kind of love, the kind that shows up repeatedly and without keeping score. She was not a bad person. I want to be clear about that because it matters. Jenny was funny and warm and had a way of making people feel immediately comfortable that I had always admired and never quite managed to replicate myself. But she also had a way of arriving at doors, mine, our parents', Carol's, with a new crisis, and the absolute genuine belief that this crisis was the last one, that after this one, everything would be different. It was never the last one. But the belief was always genuine. That's the part that made it impossible to close the door. The summer she was 24, Jenny arrived at my door on a Tuesday evening with a duffel bag and eyes that were doing the thing they did when she was frightened rather than just in trouble, which was different, which meant I brought her inside immediately and made tea and sat across from her at my kitchen table and waited. She was pregnant, 7 months pregnant, which she had managed to conceal from everyone, including me, through a combination of loose clothing and deliberate distance. The father was a man named Kevin, who had been in her life for 8 months and had left her life, cleanly and without negotiation, the moment she told him about the pregnancy. She had nowhere to go. Our parents were in Phoenix, and our mother had a heart condition that Jenny did not want to stress. And our father was the kind of man who loved his daughters in the abstract and struggled with the specific demands of their actual lives. She had me. I want to tell you honestly what I felt sitting across from her at that kitchen table. I felt love. Immediate, uncomplicated love for her and for the person she was carrying, who had not yet had the opportunity to make any choices about anything. I also felt something I am less comfortable admitting, which is that I felt ready. That is the word that came to me then, and it still feels like the right one. I had wanted a child for years. I had not found the right person to have one with, and I had made a kind of peace with that. And then I had sat across from my sister at my kitchen table and felt something shift into place. I told her she could stay. She stayed. She had the baby, a girl, 7 pounds, 2 ounces, born at Vanderbilt Medical Center on a Thursday in October. Jenny named her Claire. She held her once in the hospital room, for a long time, and I sat in the chair by the window, watching my sister hold her daughter, and I prayed, in the way I had been taught to pray as a child, and had practiced with varying consistency as an adult, that whatever happened next would be the right thing. 3 days later, Jenny asked me the question. She asked if I would raise Claire as my own. She said she was not ready. She said she knew she was not ready, in the specific, honest way she rarely applied to things about herself, which told me she had done real thinking and was not simply making another impulsive decision at a door she would regret later. She said she wanted Claire to have a stable life with a person who could provide it. She said she believed that person was me. She said, "I'll sign whatever I need to sign. I'll get you legal guardianship. I just need you to say yes." I said yes. The legal paperwork took 3 months. During those 3 months, Jenny stayed with me and helped with Claire. And I watched my sister love her daughter in the particular painful way of someone who has made a decision and is simultaneously certain it is right and devastated by what it costs. When the paperwork was done, Jenny left for Atlanta, where a friend had offered her a place to stay and a job lead and a new start, which Jenny had always needed and always found and always eventually outgrown. I became Claire's mother in every practical sense. I did not tell Claire she was adopted. This was the decision I made when Claire was 3 months old, and it was the decision I made every year after that, as she grew and became more herself and more mine, and more the organizing center of my entire existence. I told myself I would tell her when she was older, when she was ready, when the time was right. The time was never right. The time was never right because Claire was 5 and asking about why she didn't have a daddy like her friend Mia had a daddy, and I was navigating that conversation, and it didn't feel right. And then the time was never right because Claire was 8 and struggling with the transition to a new school, and it didn't feel right. And then the time was never right because Claire was 10 and we had finally found our rhythm, our good, solid rhythm, and disrupting it didn't feel right. Claire turned 11 in October. Jenny called in November. She had been calling on birthdays and holidays since Atlanta. Consistent, careful, the aunt who remembered every birthday and sent cards and texted pictures of funny animals, and never, to her enormous credit, inserted herself in a way that complicated what I was doing. We had an understanding that had never been formally stated, but had held for 11 years. Jenny was Aunt Jenny. I was Mom. Claire was mine. Until November. Jenny called on a Sunday evening, and I could tell from the first word, the way she said my name, Diane, with that specific weight, that something was different. She had been diagnosed with an illness. Serious. The kind of serious that reorganizes everything. She said the doctors were cautiously optimistic, but that cautiously optimistic was not the same as certain, and that she had been sitting with this information for 3 weeks. And the thing she kept coming back to, the thing she could not stop thinking about, was Claire. She said, I need Claire to know. If something happens to me, I need her to know that I am her mother. I need her to have that. I cannot leave this world and have her not know where she came from. I sat at my kitchen table, the same kitchen table. I said, Jenny, she's 11 years old. Jenny said, I know how old she is. I said, she calls me Mom. She has called me Mom for 11 years. She doesn't know any other story. Jenny said, I know, and I am sorry for how hard this is, but she deserves the truth. And Diane, so do you. You deserve to stop carrying this. I had not thought of it as something I was carrying. I had thought of it as something I was protecting. The reframing undid me in a way I had not anticipated. I did not sleep that night. I did not sleep for 3 nights. On the fourth morning, I got up and made breakfast, eggs and toast, which was our Saturday routine. And when Claire came downstairs in her pajamas, with her hair in the particular chaos it was always in before she brushed it, I looked at this 11-year-old girl who had her aunt's eyes and her grandmother's hands and my stubbornness, which she had acquired by proximity and practice rather than blood. And I understood that what I had been protecting was not only Claire. I had been protecting myself. I had been protecting the version of the story in which I was simply her mother, uncomplicated, undisputed, with no asterisk and no explanation required. I told her on a Saturday afternoon in December. I sat across from her at the kitchen table, and I told her the truth from the beginning. The Tuesday evening, and the duffel bag, and the hospital, and the paperwork. I told her about Aunt Jenny, and what Aunt Jenny had asked, and what I had said, and what I had felt. I told her that every decision had been made out of love, Jenny's love and mine, and that love was the only true thing in the whole story, even when the story itself was complicated. Claire listened. She was very still in the way she got when she was processing something significant. She had always been a processor. She needed time with things before she responded to them. I had learned to give her that time. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Are you still my mom?" I said, "Yes, I am still your mom. That does not change. That will never change." She said, "And Aunt Jenny is my other mom?" I said, "Yes, if you want to think of it that way." She thought about it. "I have two moms." I said, "Yes." She looked at the table. Then she looked at me. "Can I call Aunt Jenny?" I got her the phone. I went to the kitchen window and looked at the garden while Claire called Jenny. I could hear Claire's voice behind me, careful at first, then less careful. Then at one point, something that was almost a laugh. I stood at the window and looked at the winter garden, the empty beds waiting for spring, and I let myself feel the full, complicated weight of 11 years arriving at this moment. The love and the secret and the protection that had also been, if I was being truly honest, a kind of possession. The truth had not destroyed everything. I had believed it would. I had believed that the story I had built for 11 years would collapse under the weight of the real one. That Claire would look at me differently. That I would become something less than what I had been. I was still her mother. That had not changed. What had changed was that Claire now knew where she came from. She knew that two women had loved her enough to make an impossible decision between them. She knew that she had not been left because she was unwanted, but kept because she was loved. By me, and by the woman who had held her once in a hospital room on a Thursday in October, and understood, with the specific clarity of the most difficult kind of love, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to give them to the person who can love them best. Jenny is still here. The cautiously optimistic became more optimistic as the months passed. She and Claire talk every week. She came to Nashville in the spring and stayed for a weekend, and the three of us sat at my kitchen table. The same table, always the same table, and talked the way you talk when the truth is finally in the room, and there is nothing left to protect. It was the best weekend I can remember in a long time. I want to say one thing to anyone carrying a secret they believe they are carrying for the right reasons. Maybe you are. Maybe the reasons are right. I am not here to tell you otherwise. But consider this. The truth has a weight, and you have been carrying that weight for years, and you have gotten so used to the weight that you have forgotten what it feels like to put it down. Put it down. Not because the truth is easy. It is not easy. It is the hardest thing I have ever done, and I sat in my kitchen for 3 nights without sleeping before I could do it. But the love on the other side of the truth, the love that survives it and continues after it, that love is lighter than the secret ever was. Claire still calls me Mom. She always will. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that the truth, as hard as it is always lighter than the secret. Subscribe to Televera for more real, emotional stories about family, love, and the courage it takes to be honest. And leave a comment below. Have you ever carried a secret you believed was protecting someone you love? Tell us. We are listening to every single word.